My name is Olive, 36, and I never imagined my in-laws would abandon my daughter Emma while I was fighting for my life in the hospital. When I discovered my 10-year-old was left alone in their empty mansion while they cruised the Caribbean, I checked myself out against medical advice still burning with fever. What happened next changed everything. I documented their neglect, filed charges, and watched as they lost their reputation, business, and the wealthy lifestyle they always used to mock my modest living. Before I tell you how justice was finally served, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and prepare for a story about standing up to toxic family when a child's safety is at stake. When I met James during sophomore year of college, I had no idea how his family would eventually turn my life upside down. We were both 20 ambitious students with big dreams. He was studying business, following in his father's footsteps, while I was pursuing graphic design. We connected instantly over our shared love of obscure indie films and hiking adventures. James had this infectious laugh that could light up a room. Tall with kind eyes, he was the type of person who remembered everyone's birthday and always carried an extra umbrella in case someone else got caught in the rain. I fell hard and fast, and thankfully he felt the same way. We dated for 2 years before getting married at 22. Young, yes, but we were certain. The wedding was extravagant. Not my choice, but his parents, Richard and Margaret, insisted on a country club reception with over 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met. That should have been my first clue about what mattered to them. In those early days, my relationship with Richard and Margaret seemed perfect. They welcomed me warmly, inviting us to Sunday dinners at their sprawling 5-bedroom house in the most exclusive neighborhood in town. Richard, a successful investment banker, would pour expensive scotch and talk about the family business that James would someday inherit. Margaret, always impeccably dressed, even for casual gatherings, would give me little tips on how to be a proper wife in their social circle. "Olive, darling," she'd say, "a wife's appearance reflects on her husband. Perhaps we should go shopping for some more appropriate attire for the club fundraiser." I'd smile and nod, ignoring how these comments made me feel like I wasn't quite good enough as I was. James would squeeze my hand under the table, his silent way of saying, "Just go with it." He loved his parents, but recognized their tendency towards superficiality. In private, we'd laugh about their obsession with appearances. Our early married years were happy despite the occasional friction with his family. We lived in a modest starter home, saving for our future while building our careers. James worked his way up at a local marketing firm rather than joining his father's company right away, a decision that puzzled his parents but made me proud. I secured a position at a design agency and was building a solid portfolio. Then came the greatest joy of our lives. At 26, I gave birth to Emma, our beautiful daughter with James's eyes and my curly hair. She was perfect, curious, bright, and so loved. James was the most devoted father, reading to her every night, taking her for adventure walks as soon as she could toddle along beside him. Richard and Margaret transformed into doting grandparents, showering Emma with expensive gifts and taking countless photos for their country club friends to admire. For a while, our family felt complete and harmonious. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Emma was just 3 years old. James was driving home from work when a truck skidded through a red light. The impact was catastrophic. By the time I reached the hospital, he was already gone. Just like that, my partner, my best friend, my daughter's father, vanished from our lives. The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight that made it difficult to breathe. Emma was too young to fully comprehend what had happened, but she asked for her daddy every night for months, each question piercing my heart anew. During those first few weeks after the funeral, Richard and Margaret were surprisingly supportive. They helped with Emma, brought meals, and even offered financial assistance if I needed it. I was grateful for their presence, clinging to this last connection to James. Then the life insurance policy paid out. James had been meticulous about providing for us if anything happened to him, leaving behind a policy worth $500,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it provided security, enough to pay off our mortgage and set aside money for Emma's education while I figured out how to navigate life as a single mother. The day the check arrived, something shifted in my in-laws' demeanor. Richard asked pointed questions about what I planned to do with all that money, suggesting I might not be equipped to manage such a sum. Margaret made comments about how James would have wanted his parents to have input on financial decisions regarding Emma's future. That money should have gone to us. I overheard Richard telling Margaret when they thought I was out of earshot. We could have managed it for Emma properly. Olive has no idea how to handle finances. Their support gradually transformed into criticism. Nothing I did was right anymore. My parenting was too lenient or too strict. My career choices were selfish. The neighborhood we lived in wasn't suitable for James's daughter. Emma deserves to grow up with the advantages James had, Margaret would say, eyeing our modest 3-bedroom house with thinly veiled disdain. This neighborhood doesn't even have a proper playground. Never mind that we lived 3 blocks from an excellent public park or that Emma's school was one of the best in the district. In their eyes, only private education and country club memberships constituted proper advantages. As the years passed, their behaviour became more controlling. They'd promise Emma extravagant outings, then cancel at the last minute with flimsy excuses that somehow circled back to being my fault. We would have taken Emma to Disney this summer, Richard told her on her 7th birthday. But your mother thought it would interfere with her work schedule. This was news to me. They had never mentioned such plans. They used their financial privilege to undermine my authority, buying Emma expensive gifts I'd specifically said were inappropriate. A smartphone at age 8, designer clothes. She would quickly outgrow a purebred puppy without discussing the responsibility of pet ownership with me first. When I established boundaries, they'd accuse me of keeping Emma from them, manipulating her perception of the situation. Your mum just doesn't want you to have fun with us, Margaret would tell Emma when I declined their invitation for a midnight movie premiere on a school night. Through it all, I tried to maintain a relationship between Emma and her grandparents. Despite their flaws, they were her connection to James, to half of her heritage. I wanted her to know her father's family, to understand where she came from. So I endured the snide comments that undermining the constant reminder that I was in their eyes not really family, despite being Emma's mother and James's chosen partner. Blood is thicker than water, Richard would say whenever a disagreement arose, the implication clear. Emma was blood, I was merely water. Meanwhile, I worked hard to build a stable life for us. After 3 years at the design agency, I transitioned to freelance web design, allowing me more flexibility to be present for Emma. We established routines, created new traditions, found our rhythm as a team of 2. Emma grew into a compassionate, intelligent child who somehow navigated the complicated dynamics between her mother and grandparents with remarkable grace. By the time Emma turned 10, I had secured several steady clients, renovated our small home, and even started a modest college fund to supplement what James had left. We weren't wealthy by Richard and Margaret's standards, but we were secure, happy, and surrounded by genuine friends rather than social climbers. If Richard and Margaret noticed these accomplishments, they never acknowledged them. Instead, they continued to point out what we lacked compared to their lifestyle: the luxury vacations, the country club memberships, the prestigious social connections. What they failed to see was how little those things mattered to Emma and me. We had something much more valuable: authenticity, love, and mutual respect. I never imagined that their sense of entitlement would escalate to endangering Emma's safety. But then again, I never imagined I'd end up in intensive care fighting for my life either. It started with what I thought was a simple cold in late October. A runny nose, slight cough, nothing to worry about. As a single mum running my own business, I didn't have time to be sick. Clients were expecting website deliverables, Emma had her 5th grade science project due, and life didn't pause for a sniffle. "Mum, you don't sound good," Emma said one morning as I coughed through breakfast preparation. Her brow furrowed with that serious expression she'd inherited from James. "Maybe you should see a doctor." "It's just a cold, sweetheart," I assured her, popping another cough drop. "I'll be fine in a day or 2. But instead of improving, my condition deteriorated rapidly. What began as a tickle in my throat transformed into deep, painful coughing fits that left me gasping for air. My temperature crept up, 99, 100, 101. Still, I pushed through, working at my computer with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, shivering, despite the heat blasting through our vents. Emma stepped up without being asked, with peace, bringing me tea, reminding me to take medicine, even handling some of the household chores I normally managed. At 10 years old, she demonstrated a level of compassion and responsibility that broke my heart and filled it with pride simultaneously. "You're the best daughter anyone could ask for," I told her one evening as she brought me soup she'd heated up herself. "But I'm supposed to be taking care of you, not the other way around." "We're a team, Mum," she replied with a shrug as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "That's what you always say." By the end of the week, I could barely get out of bed. The room spun when I stood, my chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible weight, and each breath came with a frightening wheezing sound. Still, I had deadlines to meet, a child to care for. I convinced myself it was just bronchitis. I'd get antibiotics on Monday if I wasn't better. I never made it to Monday. Sunday morning, I collapsed in the kitchen while trying to make Emma breakfast. One moment I was cracking eggs, the next I was on the floor, vision tunneling to a pinpoint. Emma's panicked voice seeming to come from miles away. "Mom! Mom!" Her small hands shook my shoulders. "Can you hear me?" I tried to respond to tell her I just needed a minute, but no words came out. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness completely was Emma grabbing my phone and dialing 911, her voice steady despite the fear. "My mum collapsed and she's really sick. She's been coughing for days and now she can't get up. Yes, she's breathing, but it sounds weird, like wheezing." I woke briefly in the ambulance oxygen mask on my face, an EMT asking questions I couldn't focus enough to answer. Emma sat beside me holding my hand, looking simultaneously terrified and determined. "Your daughter saved your life," the EMT told me. "She gave us all your medical information, your medication allergies, everything. You've got a smart kid there." At the hospital, the diagnosis came quickly and seriously: severe bacterial pneumonia in both lungs. My oxygen levels were dangerously low, infection was raging through my system, and my body was shutting down. "You need to be admitted immediately," the doctor said, his expression leaving no room for argument. "This is extremely serious, Ms. Reynolds. You're looking at a minimum of 7 to 10 days of IV antibiotics and respiratory therapy." The words registered through my fever haze, sending a bolt of panic through me. "My daughter," I croaked. "I can't leave my daughter for that long." Emma, who hadn't left my side, squeezed my hand. "I'll be okay, Mom. You need to get better." But the question remained, who would care for her? We'd moved to this city after James died, away from the few college friends I'd kept in touch with. My parents had passed years ago, and my only sibling lived overseas. I had neighbours and work acquaintances, but no one I'd trust with my child for over a week, which left only one option: Richard and Margaret. Despite our difficult relationship, they were family. They adored Emma in their own way, and they lived in a safe, comfortable home. Surely even they would step up in a genuine emergency. From my hospital bed, hands shaking with fever and weakness, I made the call. "Olive, it's nearly 9 at night. Is everything all right?" Margaret's voice carried its usual hint of disapproval at being inconvenienced. Through laboured breathing, I explained the situation: my hospitalization, the severity of my condition, the need for someone to care for Emma. "This is all very sudden," Richard said, having apparently taken the phone. "We have commitments, plans. You can't expect us to just drop everything." "Please," I wheezed, the effort of speaking sending me into a coughing fit. "It's an emergency. I have no one else to ask." There was a long pause, muffled conversation I couldn't make out. Finally, Margaret returned to the phone. "We'll do it, of course," she said, her tone suggesting she was agreeing to a tremendous imposition rather than helping her only grandchild. "But really, Olive, you should have better contingency plans in place. This is exactly what we mean about your lack of proper planning." Even in my feverish state, the irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 7 years planning for every contingency as a single mother, except for becoming critically ill with no warning. "Thank you," I managed, swallowing both pride and irritation. "I'll text you the details for Emma's school and her routine. She has mild asthma, so she needs her inhaler if she gets short of breath, especially at night." Yes, we know how to care for our own granddaughter," Margaret interrupted. "Just focus on getting better. We'll pick her up in an hour." After ending the call, I turned to Emma, who had been sitting quietly nearby, pretending not to listen, but clearly absorbing every word. "You're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa while I'm in the hospital," I told her, trying to sound positive despite my reservations. "It'll just be for a week or so until I'm better." Emma's expression was neutral, carefully controlled. "Okay, Mom. Will they take me to school? I have that presentation on Thursday." "Yes, they will. I'll make sure they know all about it." I squeezed her hand. "I know things are sometimes tense between me and your grandparents, but they love you and they'll take good care of you." She nodded, but something in her eyes told me she wasn't entirely convinced. Still, what choice did we have? A nurse helped me pack a bag for Emma while we waited for Richard and Margaret to arrive. Clothes, school books, her favourite stuffed otter she still slept with, but wouldn't admit to anyone else. Her asthma medication clearly labelled with instructions. A letter I hastily wrote, reminding her how much I loved her and that I'd be better soon. When my in-laws arrived, they barely acknowledged my condition, despite the oxygen tubes in my nose and the IV in my arm. They focused entirely on Emma cooing over her while subtly suggesting this emergency was an inconvenience to their schedule. We'll have to cancel our bridge game this week. Margaret sighed to Richard just loud enough for me to hear, and reschedule that dinner with the Andersons. I provided them with detailed instructions. Emma's school schedule, homework requirements, bedtime routine, medical needs, favourite foods, and potential anxieties about being away from home during my illness. Richard waved away my concerns. We raised a child of our own, you know. I think we can manage to look after Emma for a few days without a 20-page manual. Too weak to argue, I kissed Emma goodbye, holding her as tightly as my depleted strength would allow. Be good for your grandparents, I whispered. Call me every day. I love you more than anything in the world. I love you too, Mum, she whispered back. Get better fast, okay. As they led her away, a sense of foreboding washed over me that I attributed to the fever. Despite our differences, surely Richard and Margaret would rise to the occasion in a genuine family emergency. They were Emma's grandparents after all. Whatever their flaws, they wouldn't let her down when it really mattered. I was so very wrong. The first few days in the hospital passed in a blur of antibiotics, breathing treatments, and fitful sleep. My condition was serious enough that doctors discussed the possibility of intubation if I didn't improve quickly. The infection had a powerful hold and my body was struggling to fight back. Through the haze of illness and medication, I maintained one clear focus: daily calls with Emma. The first few conversations were reassuring. She was attending school, doing homework, and her grandparents were feeding her meals she liked. Grandpa made pancakes this morning, she told me on day 3. Not as good as yours, but okay. I noticed she was always alone during our calls, never with Richard or Margaret nearby. When I asked to speak with them about her care, there was always an excuse. They were busy on another call or stepping out for something important. By the 4th day, I began noticing subtle changes in Emma's demeanour. Her responses became shorter, less detailed. When I asked specific questions about what she'd done that day, she hesitated before answering, as if carefully selecting her words. How was school today? I asked on day 4, noticing dark circles under her eyes on the video call. Fine, she replied, glancing away from the camera. Normal stuff. Are you sleeping okay? You look tired, sweetheart. Yeah, just. The house makes weird noises at night, she shrugged. Grandma and Grandpa's house is big. Something felt off, but in my medicated state, I couldn't put my finger on what was bothering me. I chalked it up to Emma adjusting to a new environment and my own anxiety about being separated from her. Then came the morning of day 5. I was finally showing improvement. Fever down, oxygen levels stabilizing, the crushing weight in my chest beginning to ease slightly. The doctor had just left after delivering the good news that I was responding to treatment when my phone rang. It wasn't Emma or my in-laws, but a number I recognized as Emma's school. Ms. Reynolds, this is Mrs. Patel from Lakeside Elementary. I'm calling because we're concerned about Emma. She's been absent for 2 days now with no call from her guardians. According to our records, she's staying with her grandparents while you're hospitalized. The room seemed to tilt sideways as adrenaline shot through my system. What do you mean, absent? She should be in school. Her grandparents are supposed to be taking her. She hasn't been here since Tuesday, Mrs. Patel said, concern evident in her voice. Today is Thursday. We've tried calling the emergency contact numbers you provided, but no one is answering. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. I spoke to Emma yesterday. She told me she was at school. I'm sorry, but she definitely wasn't here. Is there someone else who might have picked her up? Another relative, perhaps? No one. Panic rose in my throat. Let me try to reach her grandparents. I'll call you right back. I immediately tried calling Richard and Margaret's home phone. No answer. Their cell phones. Straight to voicemail. Emma's phone that they'd given her despite my objections. No response. With shaking hands, I called their neighbour, an elderly woman named Mrs. Winters, who had always been kind to Emma during our visits. Olive dear, how are you? I heard you were in the hospital. Mrs. Winters, I'm trying to reach Richard and Margaret. Emma is staying with them, but her school says she hasn't been there for 2 days. Have you seen them? Oh. There was a pause that made my blood run cold. I'm not sure I should say anything. Please, I begged. This is about my daughter's safety. I need to know where she is. Mrs. Winters sighed heavily. Well, I saw them loading luggage into their car 2 days ago. Quite a lot of luggage, actually. I assumed they were going on one of their trips. Did you see Emma with them? I asked, my voice rising with desperation. No, dear. I didn't see Emma at all. The room spun around me as the implications sank in. I thanked Mrs. Winters and hung up, then immediately tried Emma's phone again. This time I let it ring and ring, praying she would answer. On the 10th ring, just as I was about to hang up, there was a click. "Mom." Emma's voice was small, tentative. "Emma, thank God, where are you? Are you okay? Why aren't you at school?" There was a pause, then a muffled sob. "I'm at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Alone. Where are your grandparents?" Another pause. They had to go away for a few days. They said I shouldn't tell you because you need to focus on getting better. The monitor attached to my finger began beeping as my pulse skyrocketed. "Emma, sweetheart, are you telling me your grandparents left you alone in their house?" Her voice broke. "They said I'm old enough to manage for a few days. They left food in the fridge and money for pizza. They said I shouldn't bother you because it would just make you worse." I struggled to control my breathing as rage and fear competed for dominance. "How long have they been gone, Emma? Tell me exactly." "They left Tuesday morning. They said it was just a short cruise, 4 days. They're coming back Saturday." Her voice was small, frightened. "I'm sorry I lied about school. They told me to pretend everything was normal so you wouldn't worry." 4 days. They had left my 10-year-old daughter alone for 4 days while I was hospitalized with severe pneumonia. Emma listened to me carefully. "Are you safe right now? Is anyone there with you?" "I'm alone," she whispered. "I'm scared at night. The house makes noises and it's so big. I've been sleeping in their TV room with the lights on. What have you been eating? Are you taking your asthma medication?" "There's cereal and sandwich stuff. I ordered pizza yesterday like they said I could." Her voice caught. "I forgot my inhaler last night. I was wheezing a little this morning." Every parental alarm in my body was blaring. My daughter was alone, scared missing her medication, and had been abandoned by the adults who were supposed to protect her. "Emma, I'm coming to get you right now." "But Mom, you're sick. The doctors said..." "I don't care what the doctors said. You're more important. Stay exactly where you are. Don't open the door for anyone except me. I'm on my way." I hung up and immediately pressed the call button for the nurse. When she arrived, I was already pulling out my IV. "Ms. Reynolds, what are you doing? You can't remove that." "My daughter has been abandoned by her grandparents," I said, my voice deadly calm despite the storm raging inside me. "She's 10 years old and alone. I need to be discharged immediately." The nurse called for the doctor, who arrived quickly and tried to reason with me. "Your condition is still serious," he explained. "Leaving now could cause a major setback. Your oxygen levels aren't stable enough for discharge." "Then give me portable oxygen," I countered. "I'm leaving with or without your approval. This is an emergency." After realizing I couldn't be dissuaded, the doctor reluctantly agreed to discharge me, against medical advice, making me sign forms acknowledging the risks. The nurse provided instructions for continued antibiotics and arranged for portable oxygen, her face etched with concern. "At least let us call someone else to pick up your daughter," she suggested. "You're in no condition to drive." "I don't have anyone else." I explained the truth of those words hitting me anew. "But I won't be driving. I'll call a rideshare." 90 minutes later, still wearing my hospital wristband and connected to a portable oxygen tank, I was in the back of a rideshare, heading to Richard and Margaret's home. Every breath was an effort, my body protesting this premature departure from medical care, but nothing could have kept me in that hospital bed, knowing Emma was alone and afraid. The driver, sensing the urgency of the situation, drove quickly but carefully through mid-morning traffic. I stared out the window, my mind racing with worry for Emma and fury at my in-laws. How could they have done this? What kind of people leave a child alone for days? Especially one with a medical condition like asthma. When we finally arrived at the sprawling colonial house in its manicured neighborhood, I practically fell out of the car in my haste. The driver, concerned, helped me with the oxygen tank up to the front door. "Are you sure you're okay, ma'am?" he asked, eyeing my hospital gown visible under my hastily donned sweater. "I will be once I have my daughter," I assured him, ringing the doorbell repeatedly. The door flew open and there stood Emma, her face transforming from anxiety to relief at the sight of me. She threw herself into my arms with such force I nearly toppled backward. "Mom, you really came." I held her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling her small body shake with sobs against mine. "Of course I came. I'll always come for you." After paying and thanking the driver, I managed to get Emma and myself inside. The house was unnervingly quiet, the silence of an empty home. On the kitchen counter sat a note written in Margaret's flowing script. Emma, we've decided to take that Caribbean cruise we've been planning. It's only 4 days and you're a big girl now. There's plenty of food in the refrigerator and money for pizza on the counter. Remember, don't tell your mother as she needs to focus on getting well. Be good and we'll bring you back something nice. Grandma and Grandpa. Next to the note was $50 in cash and a refrigerator stocked with junk food and a few basic items. No prepared meals, no fresh fruits or vegetables, nothing appropriate for a child to manage on her own. As I sank into a chair overcome with exhaustion and anger, Emma hovered nervously. Are you okay, Mum? Should you be out of the hospital? Even now, in the midst of this nightmare, my 10-year-old was more concerned about me than herself. I summoned a reassuring smile. I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. The important thing is that we're together now. I reached for her hand. Can you tell me exactly what happened? When did Grandma and Grandpa tell you about this trip? Emma's story emerged in pieces. Richard and Margaret had mentioned the cruise on Monday night, presenting it as something they'd planned for months. They instructed Emma not to attend school during their absence, since no one would be available to drive her. They coached her on what to say during our daily calls, emphasizing that telling me the truth would only make Mum sicker with worry. They said they were supposed to go on this cruise back in July, but had to cancel because of me staying with them now, Emma explained. Grandpa said they shouldn't have to miss out again just because you got sick. The premeditation stunned me. They had planned this cruise before even agreeing to watch Emma. They had never intended to fulfill their responsibility to her. Fighting against physical weakness, I took photos of the note, the sparse food provisions, the empty house. I recorded a brief video of Emma explaining what had happened, capturing her account, while the details were fresh. Even in my fever-addled state, I knew I needed evidence of what they'd done. Pack your things, sweetheart, I told Emma after documenting everything. We're going home. But what about Grandma and Grandpa's house? Shouldn't we wait for them? No, I said firmly. They left you alone. That's not okay, and they need to understand that. Another rideshare took us back to our modest home. Once there, I immediately called my doctor, explaining the situation. He arranged for a home health nurse to visit daily, recognizing that I was still seriously ill, but determined to care for my daughter myself. That night, as Emma slept soundly in her own bed for the first time in 5 days, I sat awake, despite my exhaustion, staring at my phone. The decision before me was monumental. If I reported Richard and Margaret's actions, it would permanently alter our family dynamics. If I didn't, I would be enabling behavior that had put my child at risk. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. Some lines cannot be crossed. Some actions cannot be forgiven without consequences. What Richard and Margaret had done wasn't just irresponsible. It was child abandonment, plain and simple. With that clarity, I began researching attorneys who specialized in family law, my path forward crystallizing with each labored breath. My in-laws had always believed their wealth and social standing placed them above repercussions. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The morning after bringing Emma home, I woke to a fever of 103 and the realization that my decision to leave the hospital had indeed set back my recovery. Every breath felt like inhaling fire, my chest tight with infection and inflammation. But hearing Emma moving around in the kitchen safe in our home confirmed I'd made the right choice, regardless of the physical cost. I dragged myself out of bed, oxygen tank in tow, to find Emma carefully preparing toast and orange juice. "Mom, you should be resting," she scolded, looking so much like her father in that moment that my heart ached. "The nurse isn't coming until 10. I can bring breakfast to you." "I wanted to see you." I managed lowering myself into a kitchen chair. "Are you feeling better being home?" She nodded, placing the toast in front of me. "Much better. I was really scared there, Mom. At night especially." The admission tightened my resolve like cement hardening. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I promise you it will never happen again." After breakfast, with Emma settled in front of the TV, watching her favorite science show, I made the first of many phone calls that would alter the course of our lives. My colleague Jennifer had recommended an attorney named Michael Sanderson who specialized in family law. Despite it being Saturday, he agreed to speak with me after hearing the basic outline of the situation. "Let me understand correctly," he said after I explained what had happened. "Your in-laws agreed to care for your 10-year-old daughter while you were hospitalized with pneumonia, and instead they left her completely alone for 4 days to go on a cruise." "Yes," I confirmed, my voice stronger than I felt. They left her without transportation to school, without proper meals, and without supervision. She has mild asthma and forgot to take her medication one night. They specifically instructed her to lie to me about the situation. Michael's voice hardened. Ms. Reynolds, what you're describing is child abandonment and endangerment, which are serious criminal offences. Even for first-time offenders, these charges can result in significant consequences. Do you have evidence of what occurred? I described the photos I'd taken Emma's recorded statement and the neighbour who could confirm the in-laws' departure with luggage. That's an excellent start. We'll need to act quickly, especially since your in-laws will be returning tomorrow. Are you prepared for what filing these charges will mean for your family relationships? They endangered my child, I said simply. Any relationship worth preserving wouldn't include that risk. We agreed that Michael would begin preparing the necessary documentation immediately. He also recommended contacting Child Protective Services and the local police to file formal reports before Richard and Margaret returned. The more official documentation we have, the stronger our case will be, he explained. Wealthy individuals like your in-laws often believe they can make problems disappear with money and connections. We need to ensure that doesn't happen here. After ending the call, I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what I was setting in motion. There would be no going back from this, no reconciliation dinners or holiday gatherings where we pretended nothing had happened. I was declaring war on my daughter's grandparents, the only living connection she had to her father. But looking at Emma innocently watching her show, unaware of how profoundly she had been betrayed by people who should have protected her, I knew there was no other choice. Some lines cannot be uncrossed. By afternoon, a CPS caseworker named Diane was sitting in our living room gently questioning Emma about her time alone in the house. I sat nearby, close enough to provide support, but giving Emma space to speak freely. Were you scared being by yourself? Diane asked. Emma nodded, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. At night, it was really scary. Their house makes weird noises and it's so big, I slept with all the lights on. Did your grandparents explain why they were leaving you alone? They said they deserved a vacation and that I was old enough to handle being by myself for a few days. Emma's voice grew smaller. They said lots of kids my age stay home alone. Diane made notes, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes compassionate. What did they tell you about contacting your mum? They said I shouldn't tell her they were gone, because it would just worry her and make her sicker. They made me promise to pretend everything was normal when we talked. Emma looked up, her eyes filling with tears. I'm sorry I lied to you, Mom. You have nothing to apologize for. I assured her, fighting back my own tears. You were put in an impossible situation by adults who should have known better. After interviewing, Emma Diane spoke with me privately about next steps. This is a clear case of child endangerment, she confirmed. I'll be filing my report immediately and recommending criminal charges be considered. Given your in-laws' imminent return, we should also discuss a safety plan. We agreed that Richard and Margaret would not be permitted unsupervised contact with Emma until the case was resolved. Any visitation would need to be approved by the court and supervised by a professional. They're not going to accept this quietly, I warned Diane. They have money and connections. They'll fight back. That's often the case, she acknowledged. But in my experience, evidence speaks louder than influence. You've done the right thing documenting everything so thoroughly. After Diane left, 2 police officers arrived to take formal statements. Emma bravely recounted her experience again, her voice growing steadier with each telling. I provided them with copies of the photos I'd taken and played Emma's recorded account. We'll file this report immediately, Officer Rodriguez assured me. Child endangerment is taken very seriously in this jurisdiction. When your in-laws return tomorrow, they should expect to be contacted by our department. That evening, as I administered my own IV antibiotics under the telephone guidance of my home health nurse, I received the first text from Richard. Olive, the ship is docking early. We'll be home around noon tomorrow. We'll bring Emma home after lunch. The casualness of the message, as if they'd done nothing wrong, as if they hadn't abandoned my child for their own pleasure, sent a wave of cold fury through me. I didn't respond. Let them discover the consequences of their actions firsthand. Sunday morning brought another spike in my fever, my body protesting the stress and premature hospital departure. The home health nurse arrived early, concerned by my symptoms during our phone check-in the previous evening. You need to be back in the hospital, she admonished after examining me. Your oxygen levels are dangerously low and you're showing signs of fluid in your lungs again. I can't leave Emma, I explained between laboured breaths. Not after what happened. After some negotiation, she agreed to increase my treatment at home, administering stronger antibiotics and arranging for a more sophisticated oxygen delivery system. "But if you don't improve by tomorrow, I'm calling an ambulance," she warned. "Your daughter needs you alive and healthy." While the nurse was still with us, my phone rang. Margaret's number flashed on the screen. I declined the call, but moments later Richard tried. Then Margaret again. Finally a text from Margaret. "We're home and just discovered Emma isn't here. Where is she? We're very concerned." The audacity was breathtaking. I typed a brief reply. "Emma is safe with me. Do not contact us again. You will be hearing from my attorney." Within minutes, my phone exploded with calls and texts, their tone shifting from concern to indignation to threats. "You had no right to enter our home in our absence. We left Emma with everything she needed. You're overreacting as usual. If you pursue this ridiculous vendetta, you'll regret it." I silenced my phone, focusing instead on Emma, who was helping the nurse organize my medications with the serious concentration of a pharmacy assistant. "You're doing a great job, Emma," the nurse praised. "Your mum is lucky to have such a responsible daughter." Emma beamed, the simple recognition of her maturity washing away some of the hurt from her grandparents' betrayal. By early afternoon, there was a knock at our door. Through the peephole, I could see Richard and Margaret standing on our porch faces, set in identical expressions of entitlement and indignation. "Should I answer it?" Emma asked nervously. "No, sweetheart. Remember what Officer Rodriguez said? We don't have to speak to them." But Richard and Margaret weren't easily deterred. They knocked again louder, then began calling through the door. "Olive, this is ridiculous. Open the door immediately." "Emma, honey, it's Grandma and Grandpa. We brought you a present from our trip." When we continued to ignore them, Richard's voice hardened. "You're making a serious mistake, Olive. We have resources you can't imagine. If you turn this into a legal battle, you'll lose everything." Eventually, they left, but not before Margaret called out one last barb. "This is exactly why James's money should have gone to us instead of you. You're not capable of making rational decisions." Their words stung, reopening old wounds about my place in the family hierarchy. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I overreacting? Would this legal fight harm Emma more than help her? Then I remembered her small voice saying, "I was really scared there, Mom." I remembered the $50 left for pizza, the empty house, the deliberate instructions to lie about her abandonment. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was finally standing up to years of subtle and not so subtle undermining manipulation and disregard for appropriate boundaries. Monday brought official movement in our case. Michael called to inform me that he had filed for an emergency custody modification and a temporary restraining order, preventing Richard and Margaret from contacting Emma outside of court-approved supervised visitation. The judge was particularly concerned about the premeditated nature of their actions, he explained. The fact that they planned the cruise before even agreeing to care for Emma demonstrates a troubling disregard for her welfare. Child Protective Services had also moved quickly, with Diane calling to confirm that her report recommended criminal charges be filed. The District Attorney's Office is reviewing the case, she told me. Given the evidence and Emma's age, they're taking this very seriously. Meanwhile, Richard and Margaret had hired their own attorney, a well-known lawyer who specialized in defending wealthy clients against various charges. He called Michael, attempting to negotiate a settlement before things got out of hand. They're offering a significant financial payment in exchange for dropping all charges and complaints, Michael informed me. They seem to believe everything has a price. My daughter's safety isn't for sale, I replied firmly. Proceed as planned. By Wednesday, with my health finally showing real improvement, the first hearing was scheduled regarding the temporary restraining order and custody modification. Richard and Margaret arrived at the courthouse flanked by their attorney and several friends from their social circle, clearly meant to intimidate with their collective influence. I had only Michael and the truth on my side. But as it turned out, that was enough. The judge, an older woman with shrewd eyes and little patience for theatrics, reviewed the evidence methodically. The photos of the empty house, the note left for Emma, the recorded statement of a frightened 10-year-old left to fend for herself, the neighbour's confirmation that Richard and Margaret had departed with vacation luggage. Richard and Margaret's attorney attempted to paint the situation as a simple misunderstanding. Your Honour, my clients believed Ms. Reynolds was aware of their brief vacation. They left adequate provisions for their granddaughter and were in regular contact. This is being blown completely out of proportion by an emotionally unstable mother. The judge's expression hardened. "Counselor, are your clients seriously suggesting that a 10-year-old child with a medical condition should be left alone for 4 days under any circumstances?" "Your Honour, many children Emma's age stay home alone for short periods. My clients ensured she had food, shelter and money for additional needs. And her asthma medication. Who was monitoring that? Who would have responded if she'd had an attack in the middle of the night?" The judge shook her head. "I find the temporary restraining order not only appropriate, but necessary given the facts presented. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges." Richard's face flushed dark red at these words, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. Margaret began to cry quietly, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, a performance I recognised from many family disputes. As we left the courtroom, Richard approached me, despite the bailiff's warning to maintain distance. "You've made a grave mistake." He hissed, his voice low but vibrating with anger. "We were trying to be generous, offering financial compensation for this misunderstanding. Now you'll get nothing from us. Nothing." The bailiff stepped between us, directing Richard back toward his attorney, but his words lingered in the air like poison. I realised with sudden clarity that Richard and Margaret had never seen this as a matter of Emma's safety or welfare. To them, this was about power control and the belief that their wealth could absolve them of responsibility. That evening, as Emma and I shared dinner at our small kitchen table, I received a text from Sarah James's cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in years. "Olive, I just heard what happened with Richard and Margaret. I want you to know that not everyone in the family is taking their side. What they did was inexcusable. James would be furious. Let me know if you need anything at all." The message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. For 7 years, I'd felt isolated from James's family, as if his death had severed any real connection I had to his side of the family tree. Sarah's support, even from a distance, was a reminder that Richard and Margaret didn't speak for everyone. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated in ways I hadn't anticipated. The District Attorney's Office formally charged Richard and Margaret with child abandonment and endangerment, resulting in their fingerprinting and booking, a humiliation that reverberated through their social circles. Their friends initially rallied around them, offering character references and public support. But as details of the case emerged, that support began to fracture. It was one thing to stand by friends accused of financial improprieties or social faux pas. Child endangerment was another matter entirely, particularly among a social set that prided itself on family values. Then came an unexpected development. A former housekeeper for Richard and Margaret contacted my attorney, offering information about previous incidents involving Emma that she had witnessed. They left Emma alone once before, the woman Maria revealed during our meeting, last summer when she stayed with them for a weekend. They went to a charity gala that ran late, and rather than cancel or hire a sitter, they simply told Emma to go to bed and not open the door for anyone. She couldn't have been more than 9 then. Maria also described witnessing emotional manipulation with Richard and Margaret, frequently telling Emma that I was preventing her from having advantages, and suggesting that she would be better off living with them permanently. This testimony strengthened our case considerably, providing evidence of a pattern rather than an isolated incident. Michael submitted Maria's statement to both the family court judge and the district attorney, solidifying the charges against my in-laws. The repercussions extended beyond the legal realm. Richard's investment firm began losing clients who didn't want their money managed by someone facing child endangerment charges. His country club, that bastion of social standing he valued so highly, quietly asked him to take a leave of absence until the legal matters were resolved. Margaret was removed from the board of 3 different charity organisations, her carefully cultivated philanthropic image tarnished by the accusations. Through it all, Emma showed remarkable resilience. With the help of a child psychologist specialising in family trauma, she processed her feelings about her grandparents' actions and the ongoing legal battle. "I still love Grandma and Grandpa," she told me one evening after a therapy session, "but I'm really mad at them for leaving me alone and making me lie to you." "Those are completely normal feelings," I assured her, amazed by her emotional intelligence. "You can love someone and still be upset by their choices. You can forgive them someday without forgetting what happened." As the criminal case progressed, Richard and Margaret's attorney approached Michael with an offer they would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for no jail time, assuming we would support such an arrangement. "They're facing the very real possibility of serving time," Michael explained. The evidence is overwhelming and the judge isn't sympathetic to their situation. This plea deal would still result in significant fines, community service, and mandatory counselling. I considered the options carefully. My goal had never been vengeance, but accountability and the assurance that Emma would be protected from future harm. After discussing it with Emma's therapist to understand how different outcomes might affect her, I agreed to the arrangement. But with conditions, I told Michael. They need to acknowledge what they did was wrong, not just legally, but morally. No more justifications or excuses. And any future contact with Emma needs to be at her discretion, supervised and contingent on their continued therapy. The plea deal was accepted, sparing everyone the trauma of a full criminal trial. Richard and Margaret received substantial fines, 200 hours of community service each, and mandatory parenting and empathy counselling. The judge also ordered them to attend therapy sessions with Emma if and when she felt ready for such contact. But the legal consequences paled in comparison to the social and financial fallout they experienced. Richard's business, already struggling from the scandal, collapsed completely when a regulatory investigation, triggered by the increased scrutiny from the criminal case, uncovered ethical violations in his investment practices. Clients withdrew their remaining funds, partners distanced themselves, and the firm that had been his pride for 3 decades closed its doors. Their lavish lifestyle, sustained by Richard's business success, became unsustainable. The mansion with its manicured lawns and tennis court went on the market. The luxury cars were sold. The expensive country club memberships lapsed. Within 6 months of that fateful Thanksgiving, when they abandoned Emma Richard, and Margaret moved into a modest 3-bedroom house in an ordinary suburban neighbourhood, ironically not dissimilar to the home they had frequently mocked me for providing Emma. The final twist came through James's cousin Sarah, who had maintained contact since reaching out after the initial court hearing. "I found something you should see," she told me during a visit to our home. After all this happened with Richard and Margaret, I started going through some of James's things that I'd kept after the funeral. Letters, cards, that sort of thing. She handed me a sealed envelope addressed to Emma, to be opened on her 18th birthday, in James's familiar handwriting. "I think given everything that's happened, you should read this now," Sarah suggested. "It might help you both understand some things." With Emma's permission, we opened the letter together that evening. Inside, James had written a beautiful message to his daughter expressing his love and hopes for her future. But the final paragraphs caught us both by surprise. "Emma, I want you to know something about family. Your grandparents, my parents, have always valued appearance over substance. They measure worth by bank accounts rather than character. I hope they've changed by the time you read this, but if not, remember that you don't have to accept their definition of success or happiness. Your mother understands what really matters in life. She knows that love, kindness, and integrity are worth more than any amount of money or social standing. Trust her wisdom even when my parents try to convince you otherwise. She's the strongest, most authentic person I've ever known, and the best guide you could have for navigating this complicated world." Emma and I both cried as we read his words, feeling James's presence in our small living room, his support reaching across the years when we needed it most. In the months that followed, Margaret was the first to make genuine attempts at reconciliation. Her mandatory therapy seemed to have cracked the facade she'd maintained for decades, revealing a woman who had prioritized social standing over authentic connection for most of her life. "I was wrong," she told me during a supervised meeting, the first time I'd ever heard those words from her lips. "Not just about leaving Emma alone, but about how I've treated you since James died. About a lot of things, really." Richard's journey was slower, his pride more deeply entrenched. But even he eventually acknowledged that his actions had been inexcusable, his treatment of me as Emma's mother consistently disrespectful. "James would be ashamed of me. He admitted during a family therapy session, tears in his eyes, "of how I've behaved toward both of you. Forgiveness didn't come easily or quickly. Trust once broken so profoundly takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. But gradually, carefully, we established a new kind of relationship, one based on genuine respect rather than obligation or financial leverage." Emma, with wisdom beyond her years, set her own boundaries with her grandparents. She was willing to see them in supervised settings, but made it clear that she needed honesty above all else. "No more lying," she told them firmly during their first reunion. "Not to me, not to Mom, not to yourselves." As for me, I found unexpected strength through this ordeal. The pneumonia eventually healed, leaving only the faintest rattle in my lungs as a reminder. My freelance business thrived with clients appreciating my determination and resilience. We moved to a slightly larger home in a safer neighborhood with room for Emma to have the art studio she'd always wanted. Most importantly, I discovered that standing up for what's right, even against wealth influence and family ties, isn't just possible. It's necessary. Some might view what happened as a tragedy: family relationships, fractured fortunes, lost reputations, damaged. But I see it differently. Sometimes systems need to break completely before they can be rebuilt in healthier ways. Richard and Margaret lost the trappings of success they had valued so highly, but gained something more valuable: the opportunity for authentic connection with their only grandchild. Emma lost the illusion of perfect grandparents, but gained confidence in her own judgment and the knowledge that her mother would always protect her no matter the cost. And I lost the burden of trying to maintain a relationship built on inequality and manipulation, gaining instead the freedom to parent according to my own values without constant undermining and criticism. Family isn't about blood ties or financial support or social standing. It's about love that comes with accountability, respect that flows in all directions, and the courage to protect what matters most, even when that means standing against those who believe their wealth places them beyond consequences. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? Would you have handled this situation differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more real-life stories about standing up for what's right, and share this video with someone who might need encouragement to set boundaries with toxic family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary healing.